Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Um, Hi, hello, and welcome to Abortion Academy. My name is Amelia Bono. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of Shout Your Abortion. SYA is a nationwide organization working to normalize abortion and elevate paths to access regardless of legality. We make resources, campaigns, and media intended to arm existing activists, create new ones, and foster collective participation in abortion access all over the country. Abortion Academy is a monthly webinar series where one of our brilliant colleagues takes a deeper dive into their area of expertise. These sessions are for anyone who's looking to deepen their knowledge, connect dots between issues happening at the regional, national, and international levels, or just get some fresh ideas to take back into your community. We also have a relatively new study abroad series every other month, where we pair a U.S. activist with someone who's working on abortion access internationally. So, audience members will be off camera and muted for security reasons, but you will be able to ask questions in the chat throughout the session. I almost said our Maria. Our speaker, Maria, will be talking to us for about an hour and then maybe a little less. And then we will have a question and answer. And Maria and I will chat. And we also have live Spanish translation available if you go to your Zoom, the bar at the bottom of your Zoom, and you click the globe on the right-hand side that says interpretation, and you can listen in the language of your choosing. And shout out to Diana and Maria, our translators. So today's guest is very, very special to me because she is family. Maria Torres Wedding is my cousin. So her mother-in-law and my mother are sisters. And I see that Auntie Cynthia made it into the Zoom, which is amazing. Hi, Cynthia, we love you. I think that my mom has been thwarted by technology yet again, but Mom, when you watch this recording, we love you and are sorry that you didn't make it to the live version. Um, so, Maria is the co-creator of Migrantes Unidos, a group that promotes civic engagement among asylum seekers and aims to end the harmful surveillance of immigrant communities. She is deeply committed to interdisciplinary work that centers impacted community members in program planning, service delivery, and evaluation. Maria divides her time between working directly with immigrant communities through organizing initiatives and guiding nonprofits and academic institutions in their journey to develop more authentic and responsive relationships with the communities they serve. And Maria was born in Monterrey, Mexico, and currently lives in St. Louis. So, this is our very first Abortion Academy session that is not specifically about abortion, and that's very intentional. Um, this administration is obviously throwing a whole lot of shit at the wall, um, and all marginalized people are in danger. But I think that it's become quite clear that the way that immigrants are being targeted and dehumanized is unique, and that these populations are uniquely vulnerable. And also, that like the issues of abortion and immigration, for example, are not separate at all because abortion seekers are immigrants and people who are helping others have abortions are immigrants. And also, doing activism of any kind, whether that's activism around, abortion access or immigration or Palestine, makes you a target also. So these are all like overlapping, dimensions of marginalization or of sort of like increased risk category that are, I think, requiring like fresh analysis under this new administration because like the more that you're at the nexus of any of those categories, the more likely it is or the higher your risk is of being targeted for criminalization. Um, so we're so excited to hear from Maria about this work today, also because, and I'm so excited for you to hear it from her, but the work of Migrantes Unidos is so, it's endlessly inspiring to me, sort of in the values, in the tactics, um, in just the heart that it brings to work, work that is like joyful and um, very, very like creative and dynamically being informed and shaped by the population that it is serving. And there is a lot of overlap, I think, with Maria and with Migrantes Unidos and SYA in terms of like the way we approach our work. Um, and she's brilliant, and I'm just really excited for this session. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Maria, who's going to show you some slides, and then I'll come back and we'll have a chat. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you so much, Amelia. That was so kind and warm on your part. And thank you, SYA, for giving me your platform, for letting me talk about Migrantes Unidos, which I'm very passionate about. So I'm going to share my screen because I do have slides for you today. I'm extremely interested and called as an immigrant from Mexico to do work that lies at the intersection of immigration law and public health and centering impacted community members. And when I say that, I don't mean just in terms of like surveying them about services or seeing what their take is about things, but truly designing with the community, with those most impacted. And Migrantes Unidos is sort of the confluence of all of those interests. So it's an intervention that's very close to my heart. It's a project that's very close to my heart. In 2019, I started Migrantes Unidos with my colleague, Dr. Adriana Udani, who's a political scientist and researcher. And we established the support group to help asylum seekers who are under state surveillance sort of break those patterns of isolation and meet with one another and talk about not just their struggles while living under surveillance, but really the strategies that work, how they got through it. And they quickly became a source of strength for one another. Um, so I wanna my hope is that this presentation can add like a little bit of color and texture to your understanding of our immigration system, which is very vast and includes immigrants from all over the world with all kinds of case types. And by no means do I want to give the impression that asylum seekers are an extra special type of category of immigrants. I don't think there's such thing as a more worthy immigrant than another, but it is the group that I work with, and it's the little piece that I'm here to share about. So I'd like to walk you a little bit through what I mean with an asylum seeker, what I mean with surveillance, and then the bulk of the presentation will really be walking you through how we work as a group and why I feel like this space is so special and the kind of public-facing actions we've taken over the years to raise awareness. And then at the very end, I will be doing sort of a summary of the kind of rapid response work that we've been doing as a result of the increased ICE surveillance that's happening all over the country and is also happening here. We're based out of St. Louis, Missouri. And I know that this isn't the topic you typically come to talk about in Abortion Academy, but I'm really, really excited about this crossover because I think all of our movements are connected, and the faster we talk about our challenges and our strengths, and the faster we build solidarity, the more likely we'll be to create the kind of world that we want to live in. So I'm hoping you can take anything that resonates with you, whether it's a lens or a strategy or an action, and hopefully implement that in your community wherever you are and with whatever issue you work in. So, at the most basic definition of an asylum seeker, this is a person who has come to the United States, is in the country, and has essentially spoken to the US government and said, I am afraid to return to my home country, and therefore I'm willing to go through this pretty painful process for a possibility of getting documentation status so that I can remain in the United States. And when we say fear of returning to your home country, we're talking about physical or psychological harm that they believe they will encounter as soon as they return, whether it's from an individual or a group or the government itself. And this process gets longer and longer, it seems, every year. I would say right now, a typical defensive asylum case can be 7+ years. So during that time, you don't have that permanent status. You're sort of checking in periodically with immigration courts and you're awaiting this final hearing. And one of the biggest misconceptions that exists about asylum seekers is that because they're in the United States, a lot of the public believes, well, they're already in the United States and they have this title of asylum seeker, so they must already be done with their process and must already have been sort of welcomed into the country, and now they can access all kinds of federal and state programming to support themselves and their families, and it really couldn't be further from the truth. Again, being an asylum seeker is essentially saying you're willing to put yourself on this, what I think is really a conveyor belt to deportation proceedings, in exchange for this possibility of documentation status. And unlike in the criminal justice system, there's no such thing as a court-appointed attorney. So if you're an immigrant with any case type, you're really representing yourself unless you're able to pay thousands of dollars to a private attorney or seek very competitive services at nonprofits that provide legal services. And I think that it's those immigration attorneys at nonprofits that really know this case type best. But unfortunately, while they do very brilliant work, the need is too high and they're unable to take everybody who needs an attorney. So a lot of people are unable to secure that representation. So what we've sort of been fooled to believe in is that asylum seekers need to be surveilled during this entire process, because if not, they're not going to show up to their final court hearing. They're going to abscond. They're not going to follow the rules. And as we have seen all over the news this year, immigrants are showing up to their ICE check-ins and to the court hearings even though it's very clear that ICE is actively arresting people while they're following this process. And it really, this sort of drive to engage in the system, even when the system is really harmful and makes you sort of risk this detention and deportation. These actions are really validating all of the data that we have that shows that people will show up to their court hearings. People want their day in court. People want to talk about their immigration attorney. And I would say the typical asylum seeker has a lot more faith in the immigration system than I do. Approval rates for asylum are very low, have been low for a very long time, and they really vary by state. So California is going to have much more, a much better grant rate than Missouri, for example. And then it varies judge by judge. So it's extremely subjective and is really sort of shaped by state policies and perceptions around immigration. Here in Missouri, over 90% of cases that are going before our only immigration court, which is in Kansas City, are being denied. So that means that more than 90% will not be able to be granted asylum after all of those years of waiting, and then they will be issued an order of deportation. And it's possible to appeal, but the appeal process is challenging. You typically have to have an attorney to file that appeal for you, and outcomes aren't good for appeals either. So when we talk about surveillance, this is really a billion-dollar industry. Billions and billions of dollars are being spent on, again, this myth that immigrants will abscond, immigrants will not be able to show up for their court hearings, and therefore we have to surveil them at all times. And the worst part of surveillance is that it's pitched, and for a long time, even within advocates in immigration, they would think about surveillance as an alternative to detention. And what that does, it creates sort of this dichotomy where you are either detained the entire time for your proceedings or you have to be surveilled for your proceedings. And we can't imagine a world where neither is necessary. And it's not spending billions of dollars as a country and something that really doesn't work, a system that doesn't work. So when you think about surveillance, I want you to think about surveillance as like a tentacle of detention, and it's really an expansion of detention, and not just sort of like a true alternative. What this does, it increases the proportion of immigrants that are being sort of monitored and controlled within detention. And it, again, increases the amount of tax dollars that we spend essentially just hiring ICE officers and hiring these administrative procedures that are absolutely unnecessary and very, very harmful. The methods of surveillance vary. It depends on where you live. It depends on your case type. Depends on heavily on the discretion of the ICE officer that's in charge of your case. But typically here in the St. Louis region, what we do is we call this a cocktail of options, where typically you have these annual check-ins or quarterly check-ins at the local ICE office, which is here in St. Louis, or you have these like monthly check-ins at ISAP. ISAP is the Intensive Supervision Appearance Program, and it's a subcontracted private company that does all of the surveillance for ICE. They have the contract, and they've had the contract for many years now. There are also days of home arrest. So they'll say something like, every Monday, you have to stay home from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., no excuses. We may or may not conduct a home visit. And if you fail that home visit, if we get to your house and you don't have, if you're not present, then they might threaten you with the use of an ankle monitor, which of all of the options is typically the most harmful of the surveillance methods that exist. So ankle monitors sort of go in and out of use. So there were some years where they were really heavily used, and more recently, I would say like in the last 2 years, they were less likely to be used. And instead, they were using this phone application called SmartLink. And it's a phone application that has GPS and facial recognition, which again, like it's sort of a stepladder, right? Like obviously a phone app is going to be a lot better than the ankle monitor. And obviously the ankle monitor is going to be better than detention. But we keep making these unnecessary comparisons because all of these tools are very harmful. We're also really worried because a memo was issued not too long ago urging ICE officers to sort of escalate all levels of surveillance and to really bring back these ankle monitors. They also have this other tool called a it's kind of like a smart watch that you wear that is sort of like an ankle monitor, but it's on your wrist and it's supposed to be a bit more discreet. But in this region, we haven't really seen it. It's really just been that ankle monitor. And they've stayed on people's bodies for over 2 years in a lot of cases. And the outcomes of these surveillance methods are really felt immediately by immigrants. They're felt immediately, and they often leave very much lasting scars that continue and stay with them even long after the surveillance is lifted. So the ankle monitors are really clunky, they're hot, and they emit electric shocks. So there's a lot of pain, pretty immediate pain, swelling, bleeding. That's very common. It also, because of how bulky it is and how it strikes your ankle, it makes a lot of people change their gait, and that change in gait leads to long-term lower back pain and leg pain that again stays many, many years after the ankle monitor is removed. Super common, I would say. It's a given that if you're placed on an ankle monitor and you're going through all of these different this like surveillance cocktail, you'll likely develop anxiety and or depression. Some of our members, Migrantes Unidos, have been so anxious from the surveillance that they've lost their hair and have had really complicated like psychosomatic symptoms that are hard for physicians to understand and treat. The ankle monitor also emits a sound, so it is very stigmatizing for this ankle monitor to go off in public, but it also goes off in the middle of the night. So a lot of people aren't able to have a good night's sleep because they're awoken many times throughout the night by this ankle monitor. And there's also a slew of socioeconomic consequences as well. If you are unable, if you have to stay home every Monday, all day, that's 4 days out of the month where you can't work, plus you have one monthly check-in at the ISAP office, that's five work days that you're unable to show up to work for. So it really limits the types of jobs that you can apply for. As you can imagine, employers are not going to be very lenient. They are not going to allow you to have that much job work hours lost. So it's a big problem. The stigma of ankle monitors also leads a lot of employers to either fire you when you come to work with an ankle monitor because of that assumption that you're sort of wrapped up in the criminal justice system and they don't want to deal with it, or you may not be competitive for a job because you're wearing an ankle monitor for the same reason. So a tremendous amount of job loss. We have some members that have lost up to 3 jobs while being either on the ankle monitor or on that SmartLink application. And maybe the most emotional and the saddest one for me is loss of housing. If you think about that surveillance as that tentacle of detention, it really makes its way into past the individual that they are surveilling and into the household and into their communities and into their workplaces. This technology is really weaponized to gather information, not just about the individual, but all of the other immigrants in that individual's social network. So if you think about a recent arrival, for example, that just got to St. Louis and she was hoping to live with her sister, but her sister has a boyfriend or a partner who is undocumented and not seeking asylum, then that sister might think twice before welcoming her sibling into the home out of fear that now these sort of surprise home visits or this ankle monitor or the SmartLink technology is going to, in one way or another, come into contact with the person who's undocumented. So these are really complex consequences that we don't think about when we think about surveillance being used in communities. And of course, the worst consequence of all is arrest and removal as a result of just like knowing where you are, at what time you'll be at certain places. And it's what we're seeing right now at any kind of predetermined court hearings, whether it's with a municipal court or immigration court. So Migrantes Unidos is really, we're made up of two teams, the core team and the support team. That's the dynamic that we have. And the core team is individuals with actual personal experience with being detained or surveilled. We're at about 130 members right now, all from Latin America. And our third largest group is Haitians, Haitian members. So all of our meetings are bilingual, Spanish and Haitian Creole. And all of the information that I just gave all of you for the last several slides all come from our members. So when we think about the core team, we really think about them as knowledge producers, and we want to make sure that we're crediting them with educating us. Then the biggest component too is we try as hard as possible to make sure the decisions are happening within the core team. And then us in the support team, Dr. Adriana Udani, myself, who created the group, but also our brilliant colleague Valencia Alvarez, which I don't know what we would do without her. We're in the support team. We're immigrants or children of immigrants, and we're in charge of sort of grant administration, procurement of funds, publishing, educating the public. Today's session, for example, is being led by me, not by one of our members. So I think when we're designing projects and we're thinking about centering impacted community members, we often think, okay, we'll just pass the microphone and it's done. We'll just have the asylum seeker do the thing. And that's just not the reality for a lot of people. So I think what we try to do is figure out how to remove the barriers and the clutter involved in running a project and sort of take on those logistics ourselves so that we really can distill down to these are the three paths we could possibly take as a group. How do we want to move forward? So making those decisions as accessible as possible. And as proud as I am about the support team and the skill sets we're able to offer, I think it'd be very short-sighted if we didn't also do a full scan of the skills that are present in our core team. So as we were preparing to move forward, we did an assessment of what we had to work with. And yes, they're all asylum seekers. Yes, they're all in deportation proceedings. Yes, they fear harm to their families. But they're also photographers, they're cooks, they're poets, they're creatives. We have a lot of people who are really handy in construction work. We have interpreters, or we have two really just amazing Haitian members who are fluent in Spanish and Haitian Creole, and we pay them for their time to interpret for all of our meetings and make that space more inclusive. And it's been really beautiful to be able to have Spanish speakers and Haitian Creole speakers in the same space and sort of get to know each other and to also explore the racial dynamic between what it's like to be from Latin America. And how different you can be, what language you could speak, what experiences you've had. And so they're really more cultural workers than just interpreters. And they hold the full spectrum of lived experiences. So we have members who have had an ankle monitor on for 2+ years. We have members who've sort of graduated from this state of surveillance. We have members who've only experienced check-ins or have only experienced SmartLink. So we're able to really draw from all of those experiences to have a full understanding of the scope of harm. And we've also just been incredibly lucky to have funders who think this project is really cool and to just sort of let us dream and support us. We've also been very lucky to have immigration attorneys and therapists who are bilingual and who are very much in the fight with us, who are very close collaborators that we could always sort of reach for. We're a fiscally sponsored project. We're not a nonprofit, and I think that is very clear based on this timeline because when we talked to our funders, we said, hey, we want to do this work, but we're going to do it extremely slowly, like a snail. And they supported it. So we've been we've it's just been amazing to have the opportunity to move so slowly and intentionally. So Adriana and I designed this intervention in 2019. And then in 2020, we started these support groups. So basically, like at least once a month, having gatherings where people could meet one another. And um, we launched it in the middle of a pandemic. So it's like a very important timely thing for the group in that I would say prior to the pandemic, most of the asylum seekers I had worked with in the past did not know how to make it into a Zoom meeting, Amelia. Like it's hard. But because of the pandemic, a lot of them had to be forced into learning how to manage Zoom for their children so their children could go to school. So it made it so that when we started meeting virtually, they were able to have the tech knowledge to join those Zoom rooms and share with one another. And so we've been meeting consistently, like I said, at least once a month since 2020 for that mutual support. And so it was a whole year of just sort of figuring out what supports exist in the room. And then 2021 through 2022 was really a period of developing group identity and determining our priorities and our goals and like learning how to move forward together and like take steps, even though we have very diverse experiences and perhaps very different ideas about how the work needed to be done, but it took that long to like come to agreement on how to move forward. And then in 2023 is when we sort of became public facing. So all of the work that happened before 2023 was all internal, was only facing MU, was really just supporting the group. And then in 2023, we really broke out, and that's going to be the bulk of the presentation now, how we've engaged the public, how we've raised awareness on this important issue. And so in terms of goals, the immigration system is built on isolation. Isolation is how they divide us. Isolation is how they sort of temper our spirit and our joy. Isolation is how they prevent us from seeing patterns. And so when we started meeting together, a lot of people thought, maybe surveillance is especially bad for me and my family because of that one time I was late to an appointment, or because that one time I kind of spoke back to my ICE officer. But then when we're in group and when they see other people who did follow all instruction to a T and they still are undergoing the same painful consequences of surveillance and they're still in the middle of that sort of cocktail. And then it clicks. This is not me. This is not my fault. This is not me not navigating this properly or not having the resources to navigate it. It's this is intentional and this is the system, you know, when a 40-year-old man complains about his ankle monitor and then he sees that a 67-year-old was put on an ankle monitor for 2 years, then his analysis of what the system does to people is very different. So that's what that's our number one goal is to really break that isolation and give way for critical thinking. And like I said before, all of the knowledge that I have on the harms of surveillance comes from our members. So another thing we did with our funders, and we told them that one of the non-negotiables for us was that we had to compensate that critical thinking. And so when we're in spaces in which we're learning from them, from that lived experience, that we have to also compensate our members for all of that critical thinking time, just like I'm being compensated for mine. And we think we've built sort of a local pipeline for recent arrivals to be able to quickly sort of get their footing and figure out how to become civically engaged in the region and how to sort of orient themselves, not just in terms of what services exist, but how to make your voice heard, which is something that's incredibly difficult for immigrants because we have to remember all of this time, we don't have voting power until we get citizenship. So until we get citizenship, we don't have that one thing that we're told over and over and over is the most powerful way of expressing ourselves and engaging civically. And as important as it is for us to end surveillance of immigrants and this harm to communities, we believe it's equally important to invest in our members. So, ending these harms is not as important, not more important than investing in our members and in their leadership and in making sure that they have the skill sets they need to make themselves heard in the world. Okay, so now I'm going to walk you through that after 2023 when we became sort of publicly facing. After years and years of listening to one another complain about all of these harms and talk about how unjust the system is, the group got really fed up and they decided they wanted to make their voices heard in the most sort of like symbolic and stereotypical way in which one would engage civically, which is a protest outside of voting, right? So we had to our knowledge, for the first asylum seeker planned and led protest in the state of Missouri. Our members were really scared. So what we did is we tried to think about how to build that confidence and how to do this protest as safely as possible. So we tapped our immigration attorney partners and we asked them to do a Know Your Rights presentation that was very specific to the protest setting. And this type of Know Your Rights presentation didn't exist locally. They didn't have that. They hadn't thought about how to support immigrants in a protest setting because they hadn't had a lot of exposure to immigrants protesting. So I like to think about this as an example of how we also not just shifted the way service providers thought, but also added to their toolbox because now they have this presentation and now they can do this for other communities. We were very pleasantly surprised in that in the planning of this protest, the members who were most scared to go are the ones who showed up because they felt it was a responsibility that they had for themselves and others. I strongly believe that we are more likely to come together and fight to protect someone else's right that we care about before we protect our own. I think we learned, and some of this is cultural, like we learn to be advocates for one another in a way that's a lot more inherent than to advocate for ourselves. And I think this protest was a symptom of that. So this is the ISEP office, and this is a mix of asylum seekers, service providers, and immigration attorneys. And we were able to shut down the ISEP office for one day. They caught wind that we were coming, they got scared, and they shut down. And so they called all of their check-ins for the day and they canceled them. And we were really proud to sort of give the immigrants in the region one day back, one day in which they didn't have to face these ISEP staff people who were requiring these sort of check-ins and home arrest days for just one day. And my favorite thing about the protest is that we had very decent coverage. We had really good coverage, media coverage, and we had an NPR segment that went live during the protest. And so several of our members had been interviewed for that segment days prior. And then what we did is we listened to the actual live airing of our story, and we blasted it as much as we could in front of the ISOP office. And it felt amazing to sort of not just have the support of one another as immigrants, but to have the support of those allies, and then to have the support of the media all at the same time. And our members who spoke with the media had the opportunity to listen to themselves, advocating for the group in front of the rest of their immigrant colleagues. So it was really, really beautiful. It was just a very joyful protest. But we knew that we didn't want to just keep doing the same thing. We wanted to keep the attention of the public. We also wanted to engage in activities that were different and that sort of helped develop us, not just as like protesters, but how else can we figure out creatively to connect with people who don't have our same experiences. So we are members of the Detention Watch Network, and they were running a campaign called Defund Hate, which called for the Biden administration to divert funds from ICE and CBP and instead use it in terms of like supporting our public schools, supporting housing, supporting healthcare, just really trying to move the administration to prioritize funding in sort of spaces where we really do need that funding, and to minimize the harmful surveillance of immigrants. And that campaign had a national day of action on September 15th. And so we met as a group and we talked about September 15th and what we wanted to do. And one of our members, who's a poet and is so creative, um, was like, what's happening on September 15th? And it happened to be that we had our annual balloon glow for St. Louis. This is very, very St. Louis. So basically, over a dozen hot air balloons race on a Saturday once a year, but the Friday before then, they make the balloons glow, and so families come and they just have a good time, and they basically picnic in front of the glowing balloons. So our members decided to build a hot air balloon out of plywood. And it goes back to the skill sets we had, right? A lot of them were really handy, and so they designed and built this balloon in like no time. And then we decorated it and we took it to the event. And at the bottom of the hill of where the hot air balloon, the glow event takes place is where we sort of set up our creative action. And we brought our balloon. That's my husband with the drums. We had music, we had chants. We had a lot of educational materials to pass out. And so families, if they wanted to go to the balloon glow, they first had to see us chanting and they first had to take some of our materials. It wasn't a protest, right? It was a creative action. And if you can read the the balloon, it says Migrantes Unidos, we want to fly. So we're not protesting this balloon glow. We're saying we also want to fly. And so on the left, you'll see some of our members. By the way, not only do we have consent for all of the pictures in this presentation, we ask for consent every single time. So it actually takes a very long time to do these PowerPoint presentations because then we have to contact everyone individually and ask them if it's okay if we can use their pictures. But we also compensate the use of their images because I think it's something we often don't do. We use pictures of immigrants, we use stories of immigrants, but we don't compensate them for them. So it's important to us. So it was a super beautiful event. Again, all of our allies, all of our colleagues were there to support us. So it felt safe. We hired a photographer so we could have these really high quality pictures to sort of commemorate that day. And it was just really joyful. And by the end of the day, it really was just a lot of dancing. And you can see on the left what the balloons look like. And so they also got an introduction to the hot air balloon glow, which a lot of immigrants don't get to spend a lot of time in our parks and know a lot about our like annual festivals just because they're not in the know. So it's also another way to engage with their neighbors. And on the right, we have Jessica, who's super photogenic. So I'll have a lot of her pictures on this PowerPoint, and her sign reads, "Seeking asylum is not a crime." So that was a really beautiful event. We had so much fun with the hot air balloon glow. And so we knew that it was important for them to be in conversation with the public. That was a priority. And they wanted to tell their stories. So our colleague, Dr. Adriana Udani, put us through this special training on how to use this method of storytelling called photo voice that involves pictures. And so what we did is we asked people to opt into this project where they could choose a picture and then meet with Valencia or meet with me for about an hour and be interviewed about this picture. And basically, you tell us what we see in the picture and how you see it connected to either surveillance or your immigration journey. And I want to go through some of them very quickly with you. They were very there were just very powerful narratives that we sort of co-wrote together, right? It goes back to like you can't expect someone to do something perfectly. So the hope was we would sit down during an hour, get this narrative and edit it together and have it approved by the member, and then have it translated into English and Spanish and Haitian Creole so that everybody could access these narratives. So this particular member who is Mexican talked about how difficult it was for him to even come into the United States. So he was asked to wait at a border city in Mexico for about a year with his entire family before they were able to step on US soil to seek asylum. This was during Biden, and it was essentially this weaponization of COVID. I don't know if you remember, but COVID was used as an excuse to close the border and really limit access to the asylum seeking process. So our member talked about how difficult it was for their family during that year, but also how he managed to organize with a local initiative and organize a march to raise awareness about how these policies were really affecting immigrants. And this is not a picture his family took. It's a picture that was taken by a reporter that covered that march and that story. And this is my favorite, and I'll try to talk about it without crying. But it's called To Fly a Kite, and it's by one of our Guatemalan members who took a picture of her eldest daughter who's out of frame, but she flew a kite so high at a park here in St. Louis that the Americans around them, the strangers started clapping because she had done such a good job and she flew it so high. And so she used this as a moment to think about what it means to be seen in public during the liminal state of not having documentation status and to be a whole person, but to be sort of fearful to be in public, but also feel strength in being seen during that state. And she talked so much about how it shouldn't be unjust for them to be seen in public while they're waiting for this final hearing. And I would say the reason why this is my favorite entry is because we did it in 2024, so this is before this administration. And it's a beautiful entry, but I think it means so much more today than it did then. She sounded really fearful when we did this in 2024. And I remember thinking, it's a very unlikely event in which you could be harmed just because you're being seen in public while you don't have status. And as we all know, that means something tremendously different today. So these exhibits really change in meaning over time. We have a Honduran member who took these pictures of her boarding crossing experience. So the bottom one is Mexico and Guatemala, and the top one is Mexico and the United States. And she took these pictures because she wanted them to be accessible to immigrants, and she wanted people who had stepped foot in those two locations, to recognize that location, to have it sort of resonate with them. And she said it was so important for her that people get the opportunity to actually process through that really dangerous journey. And she talked about just how once you get to the United States, there's so much you have to do and so much more you have to worry about that you don't get the opportunity to think, I just went through something pretty major. And she hopes these pictures can help immigrants process in the future. And this one is our member Jessica from Haiti. And Haitians generally have to cross about 13 borders to make it to the United States. So I named all of those countries that they have to go through. And she chose to take a picture in the jungle in Panama, which is arguably the most challenging and the most deadly sort of stretch of that journey of 13 countries. And right before she took that picture, she actually saw a man die. He had a heart attack by how much he had strained himself. And so she decided to take a picture of herself in that really vulnerable state, but also as a reminder of her strength. And she connected it really easily to surveillance in that she said, surveillance is another jungle. So she talked about how just like when you're in the jungle, you don't know when you're going to exit the jungle. You can't see into the future. You can't know how long that journey is going to be. You're really lost within that jungle, even when you're being led. And she feels that that's exactly how surveillance feels. You don't know when it's going to end. You don't know what the future holds. You just know that you're trapped under that surveillance. So we had all of those really deeply meaningful one-on-ones, and we had all of these materials, and we decided they wanted to share those beautiful stories. So we launched an exhibition. So we rented out a gallery in our gallery, and we had all of those exhibits again in Spanish, Haitian Creole, and English, and we just threw a massive party, and we had a band, and we had free alcohol and free food, and we invited basically everyone we all knew. And we had about over 200 people who showed up to look at these entries. And again, just an extremely joyful space. This is our member, Melissa. She really likes this picture. And I really like it too. And something that I think the group does really well is we're able to hold pain and joy at the same time. And it's not something that most people get to experience so consistently. And it was sort of the takeaway that a lot of our guests had, where it's like, I'm reading something so dramatic on the wall. I'm looking at these pictures that are so scary, some that are very joyful, but some are really scary. And then I look around and I see that same photographer and author having a drink and enjoying her time with her children. And so that juxtaposition was really powerful for all of us, and it felt really special, and you could feel that in the air. And we had this sort of mixing of members and allies and immigration attorneys. We had elected officials in the room, and we also had funders that got to experience this. And we felt really good about inviting everyone at the same time because it it's hard to do this work without being voyeuristic. And I think when we threw a party and we made sure that everyone who was on the wall was also present at the party, I think it adds sort of this like element that helps sort of even out the scales a bit so that you're not being talked about without you being present. And it was just a really beautiful sort of introduction to the work for a lot of the people who weren't able to support us during the balloon glow or during our protest. And so on the right, we see our member Jessica in front of her picture, of her entry, and she had a lot of conversations with people there who had a lot of questions about her experience, and she had a really good time sort of explaining her journey and why it was important for her to tell that story and just be in conversation with the person who's looking at her picture. So then we have this beautiful art gallery, and what are we gonna do with this sort of beautiful exhibit of 50 photographs? So we were so successful in St. Louis that we decided to take it to other places, to other cities, and so it became sort of a touring exhibition, and we've gone to Southern Illinois to Chicago to Kansas City, and we've also done a lot of professional development in New Orleans. And I think we're getting good as like progressive either service providers or nonprofits or projects, we're getting pretty good at the storytelling piece. But I think where we're still having to do a lot more work is in including the storyteller in the actual critical analysis and context for that story. And so to sort of tackle that issue, what we decided to do was to bring our members with us to conferences. So on the left, you'll see Jessica, who's at this picture was taken at the exhibit in St. Louis. So she's in front of her picture. But she also presented with us at this conference in Kansas City. And so she's taking a picture in front of the PowerPoint presentation we presented about the gallery exhibit, where she's in front of that picture. And so we're getting really meta, and our hope is to sort of continue and lean into that sort of meta where we're not leaving the storyteller behind when we're telling the stories. And we make sure we pay all of their expenses so they're able to come to this conference. And we also very much are interested and committed to paying them for their time, because typically what happens is those with most privilege travel to conferences to tell stories, and typically we're not telling stories that are our own. So this is at a conference as well. On the left, this is the family that had the to fly a kite story, and the kite flyer is giving you the peace sign. And on the right, we have Adelaida, who's just one of our fiercest members, with her children. And something I think about all of the time is these kids are growing up thinking it's really normal for their parents to be both asylum seekers and public speakers. And that just really warms my heart. Like they see their parents excel in these spaces and talk to rooms of over 100 people, 100 Americans, and they see this as something that their parents just do. And as an immigrant, I think about what it would have done for my self-esteem and my sort of perception of immigrants if I had the opportunity to see my parents excel this way. So those are a lot of the sort of past actions that we've taken. But like I said, every like 6 months, we kind of reinvent ourselves and start with a different way of engaging with the material. And one of our members, some time ago, two of our members kept insisting that state surveillance felt like being married to a machista. They just kept making these comparisons. So what we did is we launched this wheel session series where we invited only female members of the group to come into these small group discussions where we are doing sort of very pointed comparisons between intimate partner violence and state-sanctioned violence. So we take the wheel of power and control and go spoke by spoke. And so, for example, one of the spokes is using coercion and threats. So we talk about what that was like in a relationship and what that is like in terms of the state-sanctioned violence that they're experiencing. Unfortunately, intimate partner violence is so pervasive that most of our members know this wheel quite well. And so they already have a lens in language that facilitates this critical analysis that perhaps their male counterparts don't yet. So our goal is to summarize what we've learned from all these wheel sessions and launch a new conference series in which we try to help immigrants process state-sanctioned violence from this with the use of this lens, and also just remind service providers and especially therapists who have a ton of experiences like helping individuals through intimate partner violence and just sort of remind them that they already have a lot of skill sets that are very transferable to address state-sanctioned violence. And this fall, we're launching a eight-part art therapy series to process migration grief, even if things went perfectly. Even if you're very likely to get asylum, even if you suffered less than your counterparts, there's a lot of grief that comes from leaving your home country. You leave people behind, you leave culture behind, you leave language behind, you leave a lot of norms behind, and a lot of you sort of throw yourself into the unknown. So this is going to be using, our therapist will be using a lot of different materials to help us process that grief in group. And we'd like for the culmination of this eight-part series to be some sort of public showcase with all of the art produced through this series. We're not sure if it'll be like some sort of performance art element to it as well, or if we will just sort of have artifacts. Um, and so I think a lot of what we talked about so far has been like difficult, but also like super creative and very joyful. But there's a very real need to have conversations with our members where unfortunately we're talking about very grim subject matter, and we're trying to sort of measure our tone. We don't want to feed fear into our members and our communities. And at the same time, we do want to prepare for a worst case scenario because ICE enforcement is so rampant. And at this point, it doesn't matter if you have an immigration hearing that's active. It doesn't matter if you have a driver's license. It doesn't matter if you have work authorization. People are being arrested. And once they're arrested and put into detention, it's very, very unlikely you'll be able to get out, even if you have an attorney. So it's incredibly grim. So we've done our best to sort of safety plan with our families and support and invite immigration attorneys to come do power of attorney workshops where people have the opportunity to sit down with an attorney, be screened for any possible other immigration relief, but also draft up this legal document that sort of gives authority and the legal right to a certain loved one that's designated to take care of their finances or their children in case of a detention or deportation. We've also really mobilized and supported our local accompaniment programs. So accompaniment programs, if you're not familiar, are typically programs that will partner a US citizen with an immigrant who has to go to an ICE check-in or who has to go to immigration court to witness that process and to sound the alarm as quickly as possible if a person is detained. We've engaged and have done so many Know Your Rights presentations that are both immigrant facing and ally facing, so that both immigrants and allies can know how to defend their Fourth Amendment rights. And these Know Your Rights presentations go hand in hand with ICE Watch training. So Know Your Rights presentations is knowing how to defend your rights. ICE Watch trainings are so that people can document when those rights are being violated. My colleague Valencia has really been the spearhead behind the region's the ICE Watch trainings. She's worked with organizations, she's worked with different groups, and I think now her goal is to work with neighborhoods, like the smaller the better, because something that happens with ICE Watch that we see all the time is that there's a sighting, but by the time that watcher gets to that sighting, the event is over and the ICE officer is gone. So it's really important that we're training neighborhoods in a very nuclear way so that people can mobilize themselves a lot faster and actually get to that event as quickly as possible and make it there in time. And then we've been, I think, pretty instrumental in supporting our rapid response service regionally. So we help launch a hotline so that immigrants and allies can call if they see ICE or if they see or if they are facing an immigration officer and they want to be reminded of their Fourth Amendment rights. Unfortunately, what is happening is the majority of the calls that we're getting to the hotline are actually calls in which a person's asking for help because their loved one has already been detained. I think what we're seeing a lot in the media is sort of like ICE taking people, which is very true. It's very much happening. It's happening here too. But the biggest threat that immigrants are really currently facing is actually police. So what's happening is these traffic stops by local police lead to an arrest, lead to a sort of an to an arrest, and while in jail, they look up the person to see if there's an ICE hold. And more often than not, they'll actually keep the person in jail until ICE is able to secure sort of transportation and get that person into immigration detention. So our biggest threat right now are traffic stops locally. Missouri has never had a detention center for immigrants, which is good. There aren't that many detention centers in the Midwest, but that has made it so that most of our immigration attorneys don't have the logistical know-how or the experience of serving immigrants who are detained. And most detentions now, when people are given over to ICE, most people are being detained at local jails. So it's local jails in Missouri for now building capacity to house immigrants until they can be transferred to the Louisiana detention center, which is the last stop before a deportation flight. So we've just tried to be as responsive and as supportive, building these networks and building these processes out to try to support our community. We see rapid response as a priority for us in the support team because we're building something that will hopefully hold and support our members if our members ever get wrapped up with a detention. I was not asked to produce a list of readings, but I just really like to read and to share books. And when I think about Migrantes Unidos, I think these are the four books that have really shaped how we think about this work. They've provided us historical context, they've provided us strategies, they've taught us patience, and they've helped us see each other with a lot more empathy. So high recommends, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Hello. Oh my
Hi.
gosh, Maria. I I don't know how I'm not going to just cry the whole question and answer session instead of just my usual dip into a small cry. Um, that was just so incredible to hear from you. And um, I just have so much gratitude for like your work and for all of the thought that you put into this presentation and just how much heart you just shared with us and how you shared your members with us. And every layer of what you just shared was so incredibly thoughtful. It's like not only did you share your members with us, but you asked for permission and then paid them. It's just like really just so much you are like to be super corny, it's like you're building the world that you want to live in and just like in spite of and while living underneath this incredibly dehumanizing administration. So the first thing that I want to say is just thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you, Amelia. And it's okay to cry. I cry almost.
Well, yeah,
Great.
it has to be.
Yeah, I cry almost every day. I think that that's part of it. And I really appreciate you like inviting us when reproductive rights is not our area. So I really appreciate the invitation to just expand and share my world with you, my vision of the world with you.
Yeah, yeah, it's really incredible. And I think folks, if you want to ask questions in the Q&A, please feel free to do that. And Maria and I will just have a chat. And if you if we see stuff in the Q&A, we'll bring that in. I wanted to talk to you about like the there are so many points where our work, like where I see parallels, and one that I think is really obvious, sort of, is um, like internalized stigma and how that shapes people's experiences of their own lives and sort of often robs them of the ability to define their own experiences emotionally and feel like a sense of self that is not like sort of constrained by these dehumanizing external forces. And I feel like part of what part of what MU does so beautifully is just like create these like affirming, like proud, not just dignified, but proud, um, like groups of places for people to be proud and be fully human and like and just like the energy that comes through from people in their photos was just like hitting my heart every single time. And I think that there is a parallel with like the way that people who have abortions have been conditioned to feel ashamed and bad. And, when SYA first started, and people still say this all the time, like, how dare you be proud?
Mm.
Um, you know what I mean? And I think that it's not like it's obviously a vast oversimplification to say something like this person is proud of having an abortion or of like not having papers or whatever. It's like that's not the way that works. And also, who gives a fuck, even if it was? But it's like it makes a lot of sense to be proud of exactly who you are and the choices and experiences and like the path through difficulty that you have walked on your own 2 feet, and to like stand there and be proud of yourself is a revolutionary act in the self. So, yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you see stigma show up, internalized stigma show up in the lives of your members, and like how you see your work sort of helping people identify and break through that.
Yeah, there's so much stigma. I think, first and foremost, the way immigrants are portrayed in the media, the way abortions are portrayed in the media, and so like these really harmful narratives about like scenarios that don't really exist, is just
Yeah.
it's so infuriating, right? And I think a lot of what it means to be an immigrant is to want to be accepted into the United States and just sort of hope that the door doesn't close in front of you. Like, please close behind me, but not in front of me. And so I think that there is this sort of race to be like the perfect immigrant and be the kind of immigrant that this community will accept. And I do think immigration advocates have really hurt themselves by sort of engaging in these narratives when they really don't need to. Like, and I'm sure it's
Hmm.
very similar with
Yeah.
abortion work. I think like something that like we hear very often with some of our members is I follow the rules. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna behave. If you behave, it's not bad. You just have to
Hmm.
behave. There's some members that used to think that way and don't think that way anymore after sharing space with others. Um, but there's still a lot of members who very much still think that. A lot of immigrants think if we just don't get in trouble, we just need to not get
Hmm.
in trouble. And I think that that's directly connected with the other sort of narrative around criminality, where it's like, I'm not a
Hmm.
criminal. Immigrants are
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
criminals. Immigrants are not criminals. And like it is true that right now there's 59,000 immigrants detained. And
Hmm.
out of those, over 70% do not have any sort of criminal conviction. Like that is a fact.
Hmm.
And someone
Yeah,
who's been criminalized does not deserve to be in detention.
right.
And something that we've done with that movement, with our movement, is we've not only like hurt ourselves with those narratives,
Hmm.
but we've also hurt the possibilities of joining forces with other.
Hmm.
So everybody who, like those who are fighting against the incarceration of
Yeah.
people, they hear our narrative be, we're not criminals. And
Hmm.
that's not a narrative that builds bridges.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very long journey, and like I don't think I'm even
Hmm.
done, right, with my journey of
Hmm.
critical analysis. Like none of us are ever really done. I think it's a matter of putting people into spaces and having them really care about one another, and then
Hmm.
they're different and still care about one another.
Hmm.
I think that that's something that we do well, and it's part of the solution. It's not all of it, but I think it's part of the solution where um, we need to like build empathy for people who are imperfect because we're imperfect ourselves.
Yeah.
But it's something that we really struggle with, and I think that I don't mean to say that MU is like beyond those conversations, like
Hmm.
that we really have like hit our stride and we all have the same exact abolitionist mentality.
Hmm.
But I think part of it is like just making sure as a group, like, are we facing in the same direction and are we moving
Hmm.
in the same direction, even
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
inch, right? Like,
Hmm.
how can we keep people moving in that direction and keep them engaged long enough to have more and more experiences that shape those internal narratives? Because it's hard not to have that self-hatred
Hmm.
when you're surrounded by such harmful narratives.
Yeah. I'm wondering, like, you've talked about how about how like people, you know, like a lot of times people come in having internalized these harmful narratives, and I'm thinking about the parallels that exist in abortion with something like abortion later in pregnancy. Like a lot of times people are like, I had a good abortion, like my abortion was fine. And they're like sort of trained to talk as though like other people's experiences, though, like the other ones are a bargaining chip. You know what I mean? And I guess I'm wondering like, obviously with any movement building, like we have to do the work of like building a broad coalition of people that are like moving towards the same goal. But like some people are going to have a visionary, uncompromising approach, and some people are going to have like an incrementalist approach. So I guess I'm like wondering if you can talk a little bit about how like when you hear people articulating something like that, that is like, I mean, it's basically like a form of respectability politics, it's just like that same shit. Like, how do you identify that? Or do you explicitly identify that? Or is it like more of a thing where you're relying on people's sort of like mirroring their own like humanity back to each other and it kind of just like coming out more naturally?
Um, I wish I could say like I do a really good job like being graceful and like letting people sort of find their own way. But honestly, this is really hard work and it often like
Yeah.
it lands on like my mood.
Yeah, totally. Right. Well,
I
and sometimes
feel
it's like people will say some really offensive shit, you know?
Yeah, and you have to call it out. And I think Valencia and I talk about this all the time, where sometimes we'll be and we had a recent meeting where we were talking about all these arrests during a wheel session, and some of our members were really adamant of like, this is why we can't tattoo ourselves. If we tattoo ourselves,
Hmm.
we're really putting ourselves
Oh.
at risk. And then like one of our another member, like it's great when they can sort of check one another, you know?
Hmm.
Another member was like, it doesn't matter if they tattoo their face, like you still
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
treat someone in
Right.
inhumane ways. Like it doesn't matter what those tattoos are or where they're tattooed. That's
Yeah.
not the problem, it's the system. And so part of it is sort of like waiting and seeing how others sort of drive a conversation
Mm-hmm.
and sort of like there's often it's more likely than not that somebody else will check that person when they say
Mm-hmm.
something that's really difficult to hear and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like we've been around each other for so many years that
Yeah.
um, like I don't want to say we're like family because I think that that's really cheesy, and I don't think that
And
that's
it can translate to like bad boundaries,
yeah.
you know?
No. But I do think like we have a comfort with one another where we're
Yeah.
a little bit more comfortable of like calling each
Yeah.
other out, and we know that they're not going to stop coming to our meetings.
Yes.
They're still going to
Right.
come.
Yeah. And there's the expectation of some friction and that you get through that.
Yes, that we
Yeah.
get through friction, and I think we do. And it feels uncomfortable sometimes, but we still do. But I think it's a balance of like in that moment catching it,
Mm-hmm.
also giving space for others to catch it. But then I think what really has been helpful is to invest in political education. And so we've hired
Mm-hmm.
different instructors because it doesn't work if we do it, but
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
bring external experts that'll do political education and we'll have hard conversations on like
Uh-huh.
in the criminal justice system and um
They
I think
say the
it's
same thing that you've been saying
invest-
like 100 times, and then that person's like, Maria, that guy was great.
yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, and also like we just have to recognize that it's not going to happen overnight, and like
Yeah.
at least at this point, like I am willing to like have hard conversations. I'm willing to spend a lot of money on political
Mm-hmm.
education instructors. I'm willing to give people some grace, and I'm also giving myself grace and trying to figure out when it falls under what category, whether it's me checking the person, somebody else checking the person, or
Mm-hmm.
it being addressed at a later time where it's like not right to sort of address now. But I will say there have been instances in the back where it was like a very clear boundary that was crossed and that person's no longer a part of the group. So like
Yeah.
I do think that there are boundaries like
There are lines
there
that
are
like
lines.
you need to sort of hold in order to protect people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we've done a good job when it like very clearly like alarm sound, then that person's
Mm-hmm.
welcome into this space because we don't
Yeah.
have the best intentions. But if that person is trying to have the best intentions and is
Mm-hmm.
engaged, I think we just continue to have this conversation. I think
Yeah.
something that's different is that it's like we have new members that come in, we have some members that leave, but for the most part, the people who've been most engaged, like we've been together for a really long time. So this
Yeah. Yeah.
long-term intervention where I feel like
Mm-hmm.
you have the opportunity to see a little bit of growth. Whereas if we didn't have sort of that long-term commitment, we wouldn't be able to know if that person sort of heading in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Oh, something really weird just happened to my headphones. Sorry. They just some technology issue. Do you have like community norms that you circle back to and like do they shift in different contexts? Do you come up with them anew? Like,
Yeah. When we first started, we had like this list of like 5 norms that we would read
mhm,
at the very beginning of meetings. I think for us, it was really important to differentiate ourselves from any sort of like entity that could potentially like leak your information to the government. I think
yeah.
it seems very common sense now that we have all of this trust, but this trust was like very much earned over a long
Mhm,
period of time. And so we would have these very specific, very explicit conversations about how we don't share our data, how that's not our
yeah.
intent, how we will seek consent. But some of our sort of norms I've already touched on, like the idea of like, we believe knowledge is coming from you, and that is why you're being compensated for your time. It's not just to like check a box, but like
Yeah.
it's important for us to know that we see you as an intellectual and as a critical thinker,
Hmm.
someone who has just as much to offer the group um,
Hmm.
than someone else. But I think once we sort of found our groove. We stopped sort of going back to those original norms. So I think maybe what's changed is that as we're doing those activities, we've shifted from like talking about it to like implementing them
Yeah.
in very specific ways.
Hmm. Um, I I wanted to, I just keep thinking about when you were like, there's so much pain and there's so much joy. It's like the maximum of both is like the place where your work exists. And I don't know. I don't even know what my question is other than just saying I like really relate to that. And I think, I don't know, a lot of times I'll talk to people outside of who are not like actively engaged in some kind of social justice work or activist work, and they're like, oh, it must be so hard. And I'm like, it is, but it's also like, for however hard it is equally like, I feel um, the wins and the joy and the like watching people get through um is I think an experience that it's like only exists in tandem like that. Like I feel like it's such a honor and a like just it's like a level of it's like a more colorful like form of work for your soul than like you could ever find in like an office job or whatever. Like and so it's kind of like I don't know, but the idea of like existing in this place of intense both is like it's a lot. It's and it's hard, like I think it's hard for people to relate to, and I just really feel that when I listen to you talk, you know?
Oh, absolutely. It's an intense joy. It's
Yeah.
like a joy that fills you with pride that you think about like
Mhm.
any of those events. I have such fond
Oh,
memories. I still
totally.
think about how
Yeah.
I felt. I could tell how they felt, right? Like
Yeah.
people felt pride in sharing their so much pride in sharing their
Yeah.
stories and in
Yes.
sort of developing. And obviously, this is a terrible
Yeah.
well thing
Yeah.
that we're working in. But I will say, like, I've been working in immigration like all of my life, and so I've had very pretty typical high stress nonprofit jobs in which I'm helping immigrants navigate the world and or where I am helping like I worked at a nonprofit legal service provider helping people write their trauma narratives
Hmm.
for their immigration case, for example. And it was like really beautiful that I was able to like be part of this very intimate experience where we could draft a document that accurately reflected all of that pain and like also
Hmm.
represented you as an individual. But I will say my agency was really limited, and the immigrant that I was partnered with was also very limited in their agency, right? Like what they had to
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about, they were being forced to talk about in
Right.
order to get this this
Documentation just to show the court. Yeah.
exactly. So like I'm really proud of the work that I accomplished and I've
Mhm.
learned a lot. But then I compare helping someone through their legal affidavit and co-writing with them to co-authoring like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
caption that accompanies a picture that they have chosen, that they have opted to share, that they have opted to discuss and sort of link to trauma. And I think about
Mhm.
how much more agencies involved that in some way, a lot of the work that I do is very similar to the work that I used to do, but the amount of agency involved is what results in that joy.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't
Totally.
know. I kind of feel like I could not be doing Migrantes Unidos and I could be doing sort of more traditional service delivery, but I would just have the darkness and not the joy.
Yeah.
But I,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like that, that's the typical job, right? The nonprofit
Mhm.
job. It's like rewarding
Mhm.
and you're helping people, but it's also really
But
dark.
it's, yeah, it's just grueling and you're just like trapped within the constraints of systems that are, it's like that's like an extractive, that's not like a storytelling, sharing your narrative kind of situation. Yeah, I get that.
There's just no way I wouldn't work in immigration. So the way
Yeah, yeah,
that it's really hard and there are definitely challenges to like running MU, but at the same time,
yeah.
the kind of joy I experience, I wouldn't be able
Yeah.
to experience in it. The kind of pride and joy.
Yes.
I think it's like unparalleled and it's also very representative of the immigrant experience. Like
Right.
that's what it feels like to be an immigrant, to like have
Mhm.
all of these really painful memories and painful circumstances
Mhm.
and also like have so much to talk about and such
Yeah. Yeah.
intense ties. I think we're just like very open to those
Mhm.
experiences and we're very willing to like see the
Yeah.
and engage with the whole picture.
It's really cool. I think that like so much, like a lot of these specific creative projects are like, I mean, they're like the opposite of hiding, you know? And just like claiming visibility and yeah, like the pride that is and like in unexpected places, like the balloon day thing just it just kills me because it's like I love that of course the members came up with it and it just every time like we do some kind of action where we're claiming space for like people who have abortions or just like putting this word or for abortion providers, whatever, like in a place where people don't expect it.
Hmm.
Um, there's like a specific, I don't know, there's like a specific kind of, there's sort of a fun, like ha 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 vibe, but there's also like a vibe of like yeah, these actions that we take shouldn't be like prescribed to only normal protest situations that is like person standing in the prescribed area where you hold a sign because like we're everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, you know, immigrants are everywhere. People who have abortions are everywhere. We're not just like it's not like this is the people that you're around all day, every day. You just don't know because they've been taught to hide in order to stay safe. And I just think about how incredible it would be to like walk up on that like balloon action and just see people like taking up space in that context, in that unexpected way, and just like being proud and having their like balloon things. And I'm just like, it just would be such an incredible thing to unexpectedly experience. And I like wonder if you have any stories about people um either at that or at like the art show, like people that had no idea what they were about to see, like experiencing people's immigration narratives and whatever, and like what that response was like.
Yeah, I like to think that we have and we're working towards creating what I call like moments of awe in
Yes.
which someone is very unexpectedly sort of moved, just
Yeah.
absolutely moved by something that they see and having that sort of thing that they see be entirely created with like so much love and like self-respect. So I do think that that's something that we're doing that's
Hmm.
really unique and that we're getting pretty good at it, at creating
Yeah.
moments of awe and like the amount of people we may cry wherever we go
Yeah. Yeah.
is like
It's like proof of concept.
yes, it's proof of concept, exactly. It's like making people cry, it's making
Mhm.
catching them off guard. I think another thing is like we're we're not we're not taught to um, be so visible, and
Mhm.
we're not taught to be so raw in
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
sharing who we are. That's just not how things are done.
Yeah.
So I think it really it does really sort of move people to see the rawness in it and to know that we didn't hold back. Like you can see
Yeah,
any of
totally.
those like exhibits and any of those actions, and there was like no holding back. Like we
Mhm.
worked really fucking hard on that balloon.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we we worked really hard on those narratives, and people went all out, and
Mhm.
they like really expressed themselves and were really vulnerable. And like I have this theory that it's really hard to deny or ignore or destroy beauty. It's
Mhm.
really hard to do that.
Mhm.
And so I think what we try to do as we introduce ourselves into the world, like we also try to create moments of awe and products that are really beautiful. And I think that it's like we're pretty used to what like I call like trauma, or a lot of people call
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
trauma porn, right? So like
Yeah.
this is how bad things are. This is what's terrible in the world, but like
Hmm.
holding that trauma and also reminding
Hmm.
the person like I'm a full person and it doesn't matter what you do to me, I still dream. I still
Hmm.
have a family, I still have hopes.
Yeah.
I still want to shape a better future. I still want to engage, and I think that sort of beauty really comes through. And I think that's what like it really like it's really hard to look away. Um,
Yeah.
and at the art gallery, I remember like there were a lot of people who like knew what we were doing, but didn't hadn't seen the like the actual content. And people were really glued to those walls, like they're
Yeah.
reading
Yeah.
every single word. I think they were really moved by the fact that again, we were all present, like we were all
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
Um, and like I don't know, like I think it's something that it's not just, I hope our activities are not just like public facing in that it's just like helping citizens build
Mhm.
empathy for us, but
Right.
also like I hope other immigrants see
Mhm.
us and
Yeah.
see themselves in the
Mhm.
work that we do. And like one of my favorite memories from the Photo Voice exhibit, I can't remember if I told you this when we met earlier, but um, when we recruited, we had actually just had like a little bit of an influx of new members who didn't really know that much about Migrantes Unidos, but like wanted to like hang out with us and like see what we were about. And so we told them we were launching this exhibit and we asked everybody if they wanted to do an entry. A lot of people said no, and a lot of people like did say yes. And one of the Haitian members who was newer said no, but he came to the exhibit. And then after the exhibit, we always do like a post-action debrief to
Mhm.
like celebrate within the group. And he spoke up and he was like, I said absolutely no. Like it's felt too private to like talk about my experience and have it like be shared so publicly. But then I
Mhm.
came to the event and I saw that my family was already on the walls. Like I saw myself like represented in so many of those stories that I was like, oh, it's like much safer. Like my story is
Mhm.
already up there, like in
Yeah.
one shape or form. And like I think that that's also just as important to have people who maybe aren't working within Migrantes Unidos as intimately yet, but they
Mhm.
are immigrants themselves to like be able to see themselves represented and
Yeah.
get that
Yeah.
energy. But yeah, like I think about moments of all of the time and how we can create more of them and how that's really like what fuels us to move
Yeah.
forward.
Yes. I would like to RSVP a hard yes to your next moment of awe, whatever it is. I'm coming to St. Louis.
Great.
Um, I Oh, I was ignoring the chat. Okay, it's just Michelle is putting some resources in the chat. We should probably wrap up. It doesn't look like we have anything in the Q&A, but Maria, is there anything else that you wanted to share but didn't have a chance to? And is there anything, I mean, I think that you've given us a lot to jump off from in terms of like reading list resources, but like any other additional ways that we can support you, that we can elevate this work, that we can like contribute, that we can just like shine a light on what you're doing.
I really, I hope whoever is like listening reflects on moments of awe and figures out how to like incorporate it into their own work. Something I did want to just like really highlight, which is like the last link that was sent in the chat. I didn't get the chance to talk a lot about rapid response efforts, but again, Valencia Alvarez has just done a tremendous job at like launching our rapid response services in St. Louis and just has been a spearhead. And a lot of the resources that she got for helping to launch the hotline and the Ice Watch came out of North Carolina. So right now, North Carolina is killing it. They're doing an amazing job at communicating their efforts. There's an organization called Siembra, And that link is a link to request their sort of a workbook that walks you through, they call it their playbook actually, that walks you through exactly how to establish a hotline in your community, how to talk about Ice Watch. And they've been very public with their materials. So if anybody's listening and is interested in establishing a hotline or establishing rapid response services, and there isn't anything in the area, that's an
Mhm.
amazing place to start.
That is an amazing place to start. And, just like the the first like abortion helplines that we know about like started in, I believe it was Ecuador. I think it was like somewhere in Central America was the first recorded um, like helpline that just a doula started with a burner phone and proliferated the phone number in community to like help walk people through having abortions at home with pills. And that model has proliferated all over the world. Our friends in Poland run a hotline that's like used all over Europe. And I just, yeah, what you're saying is a great reminder that we like the people that started these things were not necessarily like experts in the traditional sense. They're like people that are living these experiences and wanting to share their knowledge and their lived experiences with others. And that like we can do that, and that doing that has life-changing implications for other people that haven't yet like walked into that space. And yeah, Maria, it's just I don't have enough. I can't possibly express how meaningful it was to listen today. And I'm so excited that we have this recording, and I hope that people engage with it. And I know that abortion activists like all over the country are going to find things to grab onto and hopefully be able to kind of incorporate some of this analysis into their existing work. So thank you so, so much. We love and appreciate you.
Thank you. I love you too. And yeah, I think we need to like hold ourselves accountable to the fact that we can create things that don't exist.
Yeah.
And we need to tell each other that all the time.
Yep. Yep. There's a David Graeber quote that's like, the great secret of the world is that we could just as easily build a better one. And yeah, I think about that all the time. Let's keep doing it. It's working.